Waiting, was it pun, Beckment, the cornerstone of a relationship that is unshakable? You believed the delay was rejection, and nothing was happening on the inside. But this belief was born from impatience, not truth. Waiting was never meant to break you. Waiting was the training ground where your inner posture was adjusted, where your breath learned steadiness, where your mind learned to stop begging for signs and start building strength. Nothing about your waiting was accidental. Every day you woke up and still chose to continue was a repetition in discipline. Every night you went to sleep with unanswered questions was a lesson in surrender. You were not standing still. You were being shaped. The mind wants speed because speed creates the illusion of control. But control is not mastery. Mastery comes when you can remain composed even when life refuses to give you timelines. In the waiting, you were forced to confront yourself without distraction. No applause arrived to validate your effort. No clear milestones appeared to reward your patience. This is where most people leave. They mistake discomfort for failure and silence for abandonment. You did not leave. You stayed, and by staying, you allowed the deeper work to happen. Waiting removes dependency on external motivation. When nothing encourages you, you either collapse or you mature. At first, the waiting felt heavy. You questioned your worth. You replayed past decisions. You wondered if you had missed your moment. This was not weakness. This was the shedding of illusion. Before strength becomes stable, doubt must be exposed. The waiting brought doubt to the surface so it could no longer secretly control you. You learned to sit with uncertainty without letting it turn into panic. This is not something books teach. This is something life trains. You were trained to stop asking, "When will it happen?" and start asking, "Who must I become?" Because timing responds to readiness, not desire. Desire is easy. Readiness is forged. Readiness requires patience, restraint, and the ability to delay gratification without resentment. The waiting taught you restraint. It taught you how to pause before reacting. It taught you that emotional impulses are not commands. They are signals to breathe, observe, and choose consciously. Each day you resisted the urge to quit, complain, or force outcomes. You strengthened a muscle that cannot be built any other way. The waiting also revealed your relationship with faith. Not faith as belief, but faith as behavior. Faith is not what you say when things go well. Faith is how you act when nothing makes sense. During the waiting, you continued to show up even when you felt invisible. You continued to do the work even when no one acknowledged it. You continued to hold your values even when shortcuts tempted you. This consistency in darkness is rare. Most people are disciplined only when results are visible. You learned discipline without reward. This is advanced training. There were moments when the waiting felt unfair. You watched others move ahead while you remained where you were. Comparison tried to poison your patience, but slowly you learned something important. Not all progress looks like movement. Some progress looks like stability under pressure. Some progress looks like emotional regulation. Some progress looks like learning how to remain kind without becoming weak. You stopped measuring your life against others and started measuring your response to difficulty. This shift changed everything. The waiting stripped away identities that were too small for what you are meant to carry. It removed attachments to outcomes that would have controlled you later. It exposed motivations that needed purification. If what you wanted had arrived too early, it would have amplified your fear, your ego, or your insecurity. Instead, the waiting allowed those elements to be confronted and refined. You were not delayed because you were unworthy. You were delayed because what is coming requires a stable foundation. Think carefully about this. Things that arrive too early often become burdens instead of blessings. The waiting protected you from receiving what you were not yet prepared to hold. Protection often feels like denial when viewed from impatience. But when viewed from wisdom, it is precision. You were being aligned, not ignored. Each delay was a correction. Each pause was a recalibration. Each closed door redirected you away from paths that would have drained your energy or compromised your integrity. During the waiting, you learned how to stand alone without becoming lonely. You learned how to be quiet without feeling empty. You learned how to trust without guarantees. These lessons are invisible to the outside world, but they form the backbone of inner authority. Authority does not come from titles or recognition. It comes from self-trust earned through endurance. You earned that trust by staying consistent when quitting would have been easier. The waiting also trained your nervous system. You learned how to remain calm when plans collapsed. You learned how to slow your breath when anxiety tried to rush you. You learned how to observe thoughts instead of obeying them. This regulation is power. A person who cannot regulate themselves cannot handle expansion. The waiting taught you how to remain grounded under uncertainty, which means you will remain grounded under success as well. Every time you resisted the urge to force outcomes, you strengthened patience. Every time you accepted what you could not change without bitterness, you strengthened humility. Every time you chose integrity over urgency, you strengthened character. These strengths are cumulative. They do not disappear. They form a structure inside you that will support what is coming next. You are trained to understand that effort does not always produce immediate results, but it always produces internal change. Internal change is the prerequisite for sustainable external change. The waiting taught you to respect process, to trust sequencing, to understand that life unfolds in layers, not leaps. Those who skip layers collapse under pressure. You did not skip. You stayed with the process even when it tested you. Now, when you move forward, you will not be reckless. You will be deliberate. You will not chase validation. You will move with quiet confidence. You will not rush decisions. You will listen deeply before acting. These qualities were not given to you. They were trained into you through waiting. So when you hear the word congratulations, understand its weight. It is not celebration of arrival. It is acknowledgement of preparation. You are being congratulated not for what you have achieved, but for who you have become. The waiting was not wasted time. It was the most important phase. Without it, you would not have the posture, the patience, or the inner discipline required for what comes next. You are no longer asking life to hurry. You are ready to walk at the pace required. You have learned that strength is quiet, timing is precise, and growth cannot be rushed without consequences. This understanding is rare, and that is why today the waiting ends not because time passed, but because you are prepared. The lesson of silence: there were periods when you spoke into the void, and nothing answered back. No reassurance arrived. No sign appeared. No clear direction unfolded. Silence surrounded you, and at first it felt unbearable. The human mind interprets silence as absence, as neglect, as rejection. You wondered if you were being ignored, if your efforts were unseen, if your prayers had fallen into emptiness. But silence was never emptiness. Silence was containment. Silence was protection operating beyond your understanding. Noise creates urgency. Silence creates accuracy. When everything is loud, the mind reacts. When everything is quiet, the soul learns to listen. During those silent seasons, you were not meant to move quickly. You were meant to observe. You were meant to slow your breath, steady your emotions, and learn the difference between impulse and intuition. If answers had come too easily, you would have mistaken excitement for guidance. Silence forced you to develop discernment. Many times, silence saved you from making decisions driven by fear. When the mind is desperate, it grabs the first opportunity even if it leads to damage. Silence delayed you just enough to prevent you from stepping into situations that would have drained your energy, compromised your values, or trapped you in cycles that were not aligned with your path. What you experienced as frustration was actually restraint applied by a higher intelligence. You were being held back for your own safety. In silence, you learned to sit with discomfort without trying to escape it. This is not weakness, this is discipline. Most people numb discomfort with distractions, noise, and constant stimulation. You were stripped of those escapes. You were left with yourself, your thoughts, your fears, your hopes, your contradictions. Silence brought everything to the surface. And instead of running, you stayed, you faced what rose inside you. This confrontation refined you. Silence trained you to stop seeking permission. When voices disappeared, so did external validation. You could no longer rely on approval to move forward. You had to decide what mattered based on internal alignment, not applause. This independence is critical. Those who depend on noise become controlled by opinion. Those who learn in silence become grounded in principle. You learned how to trust your own judgment without arrogance and without doubt. This balance was built quietly. There were moments when silence made you feel invisible. You questioned your significance. You wondered if your efforts mattered at all. But invisibility is not insignificance. Invisibility is incubation. Seeds grow underground, unseen, protected from disturbance. Silence created an environment where your roots could deepen without interference. Had attention arrived too early, growth would have become performance. Instead, growth became internal. Silence also protected you from false voices. Not every voice that speaks carries wisdom. Not every opportunity that presents itself carries truth. In loud seasons, you might have followed enthusiasm instead of clarity. Silence removed the distractions so you could recognize what was essential. It taught you to notice subtle signals instead of dramatic signs. This sensitivity is a form of intelligence that cannot be taught through instruction. It is learned through quiet endurance. When nothing external guided you, you were forced to refine your internal compass. You learned to ask better questions, not "what do they want from me?" but "what aligns with my values?" Not "how fast can I move?" but "what direction is correct?" Silence shifted your focus from speed to accuracy. Accuracy prevents regret. Silence saved you from many regrets you will never even know about. Silence also revealed who truly belonged in your life. When nothing was happening, when there was no excitement to share, when there was no benefit to staying close, some people faded away. This was not loss, this was clarity. Silence removes conditional connections, it leaves behind only what is real. You learned who respected your stillness and who only valued your momentum. This knowledge will guide your relationships moving forward. In silence, your ego weakened and your awareness strengthened. Without recognition, you could no longer perform. Without affirmation, you could no longer pretend. You were forced to be honest with yourself. Honest about your limitations, honest about your desires, honest about your fears. This honesty stabilized you. Stability is required for responsibility. Silence prepared you to carry weight without collapsing under it. There were times when silence tested your patience more than any obstacle ever could. Obstacles give something to fight against. Silence gives nothing, and yet you endured. You learned how to continue without feedback. You learned how to trust process without evidence. This kind of faith is rare. It is not blind faith. It is disciplined faith. Faith rooted in behavior, not emotion. Silence also slowed your reactions. You stopped responding impulsively. You started observing before speaking. You learned the power of restraint. Restraint is not suppression, it is conscious control. A restrained mind does not rush into conflict. A restrained heart does not attach too quickly. A restrained spirit waits for alignment. Silence cultivated this restraint in you. During the quiet, you learned how to sit alone without feeling empty. Solitude became a teacher instead of a threat. You discovered that peace does not require constant stimulation. It requires presence. You learned how to be with yourself fully without judgment, without escape. This self-relationship will become your anchor in future chaos. Those who cannot sit with themselves cannot handle expansion. Silence also recalibrated your priorities. When everything slowed down, what truly mattered became clear. Superficial desires lost their grip. You stopped chasing what looked impressive and started valuing what felt stable. This shift is maturity. Maturity is not losing ambition, it is refining it. Silence refined your ambition so it could serve you instead of control you. You may not realize how much danger silence protected you from. Some paths look attractive but end in exhaustion. Some doors appear open but lead to compromise. Silence prevented premature movement. It allowed time for truth to surface. Time exposes intentions. Silence gave time its space to work in your favor. Now you no longer fear quiet moments. You respect them. You understand that silence is not emptiness but instruction without words. You listen more deeply. You speak more intentionally. You move with awareness. These qualities were forged when no one was watching and nothing was happening. When the noise returns, and it will, you will not be overwhelmed. You have been trained in quiet. You know how to retreat inward when external pressure increases. You know how to pause before reacting. You know how to hear your inner voice even when the world becomes loud again. Silence was not punishment. Silence was preparation. It was the shield that protected your timing, your integrity, and your clarity. You were not ignored, you were guarded. And because of this protection, you will now move forward with precision instead of haste, with depth instead of surface strength, and with calm authority instead of fragile confidence. The silence is ending, not because it failed, but because it succeeded. Strength in softness. Strength is often misunderstood. Many believe strength means becoming hard, unfeeling, and distant. They think surviving pain requires building walls so thick that nothing can reach the heart. But that is not strength. That is armor worn out of fear. True strength is the ability to remain open without being fragile, to remain kind without being controllable, to remain soft without being broken. What you learned through your journey is rare. You learned how to endure without losing your humanity. Pain came to you repeatedly. Disappointment tested your expectations. Loss challenged your attachments. Betrayal questioned your trust. Each experience offered you a choice. You could become bitter, or you could become aware. Bitterness is easy. It gives quick relief. It allows you to blame, to close off, to justify emotional withdrawal. But bitterness is heavy. It poisons the mind and hardens the heart. You chose the slower, more difficult path. You chose wisdom. Wisdom does not arrive suddenly. It forms gradually through observation. When pain entered your life, you did not immediately understand it. At first, it hurt deeply. You questioned fairness. You questioned timing. You questioned yourself. But instead of letting pain define your identity, you allowed it to inform your understanding. You watched your reactions. You noticed where anger rose, where fear appeared, where attachment tightened. This awareness was the beginning of strength. You learned that emotions are not enemies, they are signals. Anger pointed to boundaries that had been crossed. Sadness pointed to things that mattered deeply to you. Fear pointed to areas where trust needed reinforcement. Instead of suppressing these emotions or letting them control you, You learned to listen without obeying. This is emotional intelligence. This is strength with control. There were moments when you could have closed your heart completely. When trust was broken, it would have been easy to say never again. When efforts went unnoticed, it would have been easy to say, why bother? When kindness was taken for granted, it would have been easy to withdraw. But you didn't. You adjusted, but you did not shut down. You became selective without becoming cold. This balance is difficult to achieve. It requires courage. Hardness comes from fear of being hurt again. Wisdom comes from understanding how to protect yourself without abandoning compassion. You learned the difference. You learned how to say no without guilt. You learned how to step back without resentment. You learned how to walk away without hatred. These are signs of inner maturity. They show that you are no longer reactive. You are responsive. Your strength became quiet. You no longer needed to prove anything. You no longer reacted to provocation. You no longer chased validation. This did not make you weak. It made you stable. Stability is power that does not need to announce itself. Those who are truly strong do not intimidate, they ground. They bring calm into chaos. You became this presence. Pain also taught you humility. You realized that everyone is carrying something unseen. This understanding softened your judgment. You stopped assuming malice where there was confusion. You stopped taking everything personally. This perspective freed you. When you stopped interpreting every action as an attack, you conserved energy. You chose peace over unnecessary conflict. This choice strengthened you. You also learned to forgive without forgetting. Forgiveness did not mean allowing harm to continue. It meant releasing yourself from the weight of resentment. You understood that holding on to anger gives power to what hurt you. Letting go returned that power to you. This is not emotional bypassing. It is emotional mastery. You chose freedom over attachment to pain. Your compassion deepened, but it became grounded. You no longer tried to save everyone. You no longer carried responsibilities that were not yours. You learned that helping does not mean self-sacrifice to the point of depletion. You learned to offer support without abandoning yourself. This self-respect is strength. You also became honest with yourself. You acknowledged your limitations. You accepted that you could not control outcomes, only effort and intention. This acceptance did not weaken your ambition. It refined it. You stopped fighting reality and started working with it. This alignment reduced suffering and increased effectiveness. There were times when staying kind felt risky, when remaining open felt vulnerable, when not becoming cynical felt foolish. But you trusted your values more than your fear. You understood that becoming hard would protect you temporarily, but cost you in the long term. You chose to remain human. This choice preserved your capacity for joy, connection, and meaning. Your boundaries became clearer. You learned that kindness without boundaries leads to exhaustion. Strength without compassion leads to isolation. You learned to integrate both. You could be firm and gentle, clear and respectful, direct and calm. This integration is rare because it requires self-awareness and emotional regulation. You developed both through hardship. Your ego lost its grip. You stopped needing to be right. You stopped needing to win. You stopped needing to be seen as strong. Ironically, this is when your true strength emerged. When you no longer needed to display it, it became embodied. You carried yourself differently. You listened more. You spoke with intention. You moved with purpose. You learned that resilience is not about never feeling pain. It is about not allowing pain to dictate your identity. You felt deeply, but you did not drown. You acknowledged wounds, but you did not live inside them. You healed without erasing memory. This allowed you to grow without denial. Now, when challenges arise, you meet them with calm instead of panic. You respond instead of react. You remain grounded instead of defensive. This does not mean you are unaffected. It means you are centered. Centered people are difficult to manipulate. They are not driven by fear or ego. They are driven by clarity. You have become strong in a way that is sustainable. Hardness eventually cracks. Suppressed emotion leaks out. Defensive postures exhaust the system, but integrated strength endures. It adapts. It flows. You have learned how to bend without breaking. This is the highest form of strength. So, when it is said that you became strong without becoming hard, understand the depth of this statement. You protected your essence while refining your edges. You preserved your heart while strengthening your spine. You did not let pain turn you into someone you would not respect. This is not accidental. This is earned. And because of this, you are prepared to carry responsibility, influence, and expansion without losing yourself. The architecture of becoming everything that shaped you was intentional, even when it felt random. Every closed door was strategic. Every unanswered prayer was selective hearing from a wisdom that knew better than your desperation. You were not being punished. You were being prepared with precision. The delays were not denials. They were developments happening in dimensions you could not see. While you waited on the surface, foundations were being laid underground. Structure before visibility. Roots before fruit. This is how sustainable growth works. What you called stuck was actually planted. What you called forgotten was actually protected. What you called rejected was actually redirected. The language of your impatience misinterpreted the actions of patience. You wanted acceleration. Life gave you cultivation. You wanted recognition. Life gave you preparation. You wanted arrival. Life gave you becoming. And becoming is always more valuable than arriving, because what you become determines what you can hold when things finally arrive. The waiting refined your character. The silence refined your hearing. The pain refined your compassion. The disappointment refined your expectations. The loneliness refined your self-relationship. Nothing was wasted. Everything was investment. You were being built for scale, and scale requires infrastructure. You cannot build tall without building deep. The taller the structure, the deeper the foundation must go. Your delays were your depth. While others were celebrating surface wins, you were developing subterranean strength. While others were accumulating visible achievements, you were accumulating invisible capacity. This capacity will carry you when visibility arrives. You learned how to be full without external fulfillment. You learned how to be motivated without external validation. You learned how to be confident without external confirmation. These are rare qualities because they require internal work that has no audience. Most people only do work that can be seen. You learn to do work that can only be felt, the work of self-regulation, the work of emotional processing, the work of thought management, the work of belief reconstruction. This work does not photograph well. It does not trend. It does not impress strangers, but it builds the only thing that matters, a stable self. A stable self can handle unstable circumstances. A stable self can navigate success without corruption. A stable self can experience failure without collapse. You built this stability in the dark. Now, when you step into light, you will not be blinded by it. You will not be intoxicated by attention. You will not be destabilized by opportunity. You have been trained in obscurity, which means you are prepared for visibility. The weight of what is coming would have crushed the person you were before the waiting, but it will fit comfortably on the person you have become through the waiting. This is why timing is not punishment. Timing is protection. You were held back until you were strong enough to be released forward. Every no, you received was saving you from a yes that would have harmed you. Every door that stayed closed was protecting you from a room that would have confined you. You could not see this while you were in it, but now, from this vantage point, you can look back and see the pattern. The pattern was always love, even when it felt like rejection. The pattern was always guidance, even when it felt like silence. The pattern was always preparation, even when it felt like punishment. You were never abandoned. You were always attended to. The invisible hand that shaped you never let go, even when your faith did. This is the truth you can now carry forward. You are not lucky, you are ready. What is coming is not random reward, it is precise response. Response to who you have become. Response to what you can now hold. Response to the readiness you have earned through endurance. The transformation of perspective, one of the most profound shifts that occurred during your journey, was not in your circumstances, but in your perception. You learned to see differently. Where you once saw obstacles, you now see instructions. Where you once saw delays, you now see protection. Where you once saw loss, you now see redirection. This shift in perception changed everything, because perception determines experience. Two people can face the same situation and have completely different experiences based on how they interpret what is happening. You learned to interpret through wisdom instead of through wounds. This does not mean you became naive or dismissive of pain. It means you stopped letting pain have the final word on what things meant. Pain said, "You are being rejected." Wisdom said, "You are being redirected." Pain said, "You are not enough." Wisdom said, "You are not ready yet." Pain said, "Nothing will ever change." Wisdom said, "Everything is changing beneath the surface." You learned to listen to wisdom's voice, even when pain's voice was louder. This is discernment. This is maturity. You also learned that perspective is a choice, not always an easy choice, but always an available choice. You can choose to see yourself as a victim of circumstances or as a student of life. You can choose to see difficulty as punishment or as curriculum. You can choose to see waiting as wasted time or as invested time. These choices shape your internal state, and your internal state determines your external effectiveness. You chose perspective that empowered you instead of perspective that diminished you. This choice was not made once. It was made repeatedly, daily, sometimes hourly. Every time doubt rose, you had to choose again. Every time fear whispered, you had to choose again. Every time comparison tempted, you had to choose again. The accumulation of these small choices built your new default perspective. Now your first thought is no longer defeat. Your first thought is possibility. Now your first response is no longer fear. Your first response is curiosity. Now your first interpretation is no longer "what's wrong with me?" It is "what is this teaching me?" This transformation did not make you unrealistic. It made you resilient. Resilience is not pretending everything is fine. Resilience is knowing you will be fine regardless of what happens. You developed this knowing through experience, through facing fears and discovering you could survive them, through losing things and discovering you were still whole, through being disappointed and discovering you could still hope. Each experience added evidence to a new belief. I can handle what comes. This belief is not arrogance. It is earned confidence. You know your capacity now because you have tested it. You know your resilience because you have proven it. You know your strength because you have used it. This knowledge cannot be taken from you. It is not dependent on circumstances. It is integrated into your identity. You are no longer the person who fears the unknown. You are the person who has walked through the unknown and emerged stronger. This changes how you approach everything. You no longer avoid challenge. You engage it with curiosity. You no longer fear failure. You see it as feedback. You no longer resist change. You flow with it. This flexibility is power. Rigid things break. Flexible things bend and return. You have become flexible in your thinking, adaptable in your approach, and steady in your core values. This combination makes you nearly unbreakable. Nearly, because you understand now that breaking is sometimes part of the process. That sometimes we must come apart to come back together in a better configuration. You no longer fear breaking because you know you can rebuild. This is the ultimate freedom, knowing that there is nothing to protect because everything can be restored. This freedom allows you to take risks, to be vulnerable, to try new things, to speak your truth, to pursue your vision. You are no longer held hostage by the need for safety. You are liberated by the knowledge of your own resilience. This is what the journey gave you, not just survival, but the confidence that comes from knowing you can survive anything. The power of presence through all the waiting, all the silence, all the pain. You developed something that cannot be taught in any classroom: presence. True presence, the ability to be fully here, fully now, fully engaged with what is actually happening instead of what you wish was happening or what you fear might happen. Presence is rare because it requires releasing both the past and the future. Most people live in memory or anticipation. They are replaying what happened or rehearsing what might happen. They are never actually here. You learned to be here, not because you are enlightened, but because you were forced to be. When the future was uncertain and the past was painful, all you had was now. So you learned to inhabit now fully. This changed everything. When you are present, you notice things you would otherwise miss. You see opportunities that distraction would obscure. You hear guidance that noise would drown out. You feel intuition that busyness would override. Presence gives you access to wisdom that is always available but rarely accessed. You learned to pause before responding, to breathe before deciding, to feel before acting. These small gaps between stimulus and response are where power lives. In those gaps, you can choose. You can observe your reaction before becoming your reaction. You can notice your thought without believing your thought. You can feel your emotion without obeying your emotion. This is mastery, not control of circumstances, but mastery of self within circumstances. You cannot control what happens, but you can control who you are while it happens. This is the only control that matters, and it is the only control that is actually available. You learned this not through theory, but through practice, through thousands of moments where you had to choose between reactive and responsive, between automatic and conscious, between asleep and awake. Each time you chose consciousness, you strengthened your capacity for presence. Now it is your default. You are no longer constantly pulled into past regret or future anxiety. You can visit those places, but you do not live there. You live here in the present moment, where life actually happens, where choice actually exists, where power actually resides. This presence makes you peaceful, not because your life is perfect, but because you are not constantly at war with reality. You are not arguing with what is. You are engaging with what is. This is acceptance, but not passive acceptance. It is active acceptance, acceptance that acknowledges reality fully, so it can work with reality effectively. You cannot change what you do not acknowledge. You cannot improve what you do not accept. Presence allows both acknowledgement and acceptance. And from that foundation, you can build anything. You can build new responses, new patterns, new futures. But it all starts here, in this moment, with presence. This is what makes you different now. Not your circumstances, but your consciousness. Not what you have, but how you are. Not where you stand, but how you stand. You stand present, awake. Aware, engaged, this is the foundation of all growth. This is the source of all power. This is the beginning of all transformation. And you have built this foundation through everything you have endured. Moving forward now, you stand at a threshold. Behind you, the journey that shaped you, the waiting that trained you, the silence that refined you, the pain that strengthened you. Before you, new territory, new challenges, new opportunities, new responsibilities. But you are not the same person who began this journey. You have been fundamentally transformed. You have depth where you once had only surface. You have wisdom where you once had only information. You have strength where you once had only potential. The waiting developed that potential into actual capacity. Now, when opportunity comes, you are ready, not just willing, but truly ready. Ready means having the internal structure to hold external success. Ready means having the emotional regulation to handle pressure. Ready means having the clarity to make good decisions. Ready means having the character to stay true when temptation arrives. You have all of this now, not because it was given to you, but because it was developed in you. The journey was the development process, and now the development is complete enough for deployment. This does not mean you have finished growing. Growth never finishes, but it means you have grown enough to handle what is next. The foundation is solid, the structure is sound, the preparation is sufficient. What comes next will continue to shape you, but it will not break you, because you have learned how to bend without breaking. You have learned how to stay soft without being weak. You have learned how to stay strong without being hard. This balance will carry you through whatever comes. Trust it, trust yourself, trust the process that brought you here. You have earned this moment, not through luck, but through perseverance. Not through privilege, but through patience. Not through shortcuts, but through showing up every day, even when nothing visible was happening. This consistency in obscurity has prepared you for consistency in visibility. You will not be corrupted by success because you learned your worth without it. You will not be destroyed by failure because you learned your strength through it. You will not be controlled by opinion because you learned your truth in silence. You are ready, and the waiting is over, not because time ran out, but because you are complete enough. Not because you are perfect, but because you are prepared. Not because the journey is finished, but because this chapter is complete. A new chapter begins now, and you enter it not with fear, but with confidence. Not with anxiety, but with anticipation. Not with doubt, but with trust, because you know who you are now. You know what you can handle now. You know what you are capable of now. This knowledge is unshakable because it was earned in the fire of experience. So step forward into the unknown with courage, into the new with wisdom, into the future with strength. Everything you endured was preparing you for everything that is coming. The preparation is complete. The season has shifted. The waiting has ended. Now it is time to walk in what you have become. Final words. This journey was yours. This transformation is yours. This strength is yours. You turned waiting into wisdom. You turned silence into strength. You turned pain into power. Now you walk forward grounded, quiet, ready, not because you were lucky, but because you were faithful. Not because it was easy, but because you endured. Not because you are perfect, but because you are prepared. The congratulations are not for what you have received. They are for who you have become, and who you have become is worthy of everything that is coming.